Sam had been walking for 3 days when he smelled it. It was not the cold pine smell of the mountain pass, and it was not the sharp clean smell of snow. It was something else. Something wrong. A thick, heavy smell that sat low in the air like a warning. Sam slowed his steps. He pulled his coat tighter and looked around. The mountain path was narrow and quiet. On one side, gray rock rose steeply toward the sky. On the other side, the land dropped down toward a frozen river far below. Sam had walked this pass a dozen times over the years. He knew every bend, every loose stone, every place where the wind came in hard from the east. But he had never smelled anything like this before. He followed the smell carefully, stepping off the main path and moving down a smaller trail that cut through the rocks toward the river. The snow was deeper here. His boots sank with every step. The cold bit at his face and fingers. But the smell grew stronger, and something in Sam's chest told him to keep going. He heard her before he saw her. A slow, labored sound. Like breathing but wrong. Too heavy. Too broken. The kind of breathing that took everything just to keep going. Sam came around a large boulder and stopped. She was enormous. The dragon lay on her side near the frozen riverbank, half buried under a dusting of fresh snow. Her scales were white. Not the gray white of old bone or the yellow white of dirty ice. They were pure white, almost glowing, even in the flat gray light of the winter sky. Her wings were folded close against her body. Her neck was stretched out flat against the ground. Her eyes were closed. Sam stood very still for a long moment. Then he took a step forward. He heard voices behind him. 3 men from the village of Karn were coming down the trail, carrying firewood on their backs. The oldest one, a broad man named Gil, stopped when he saw Sam standing near the dragon. Gil dropped his wood and grabbed Sam by the arm. "Are you out of your mind?" Gil said. His voice was low and sharp. "Get away from it. Right now." "She is still breathing," Sam said. "It does not matter," Gil said. "That thing has been lying there for 4 days. We have been watching from the ridge. Nobody goes near it. Nobody." Sam looked at him. "Why not?" Gil stared at him like the answer was obvious. "Albino dragon," he said. "Everyone knows. White scales mean cursed. That thing is bad luck just to look at. You go near it, the curse touches you too. Come away. Now." Sam looked back at the dragon. Her side rose and fell slowly. Each breath looked like it cost her something. "She is dying," Sam said. "Yes," Gil said. "And that is how it should be. Cursed things die. That is not our problem." Sam pulled his arm free gently. "Go on ahead," he said. "I will be fine." Gil looked at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head, picked up his firewood and walked away. The other 2 men followed without a word. Sam turned back to the dragon. He moved slowly. He kept his steps light and his hands open at his sides. He did not want to frighten her. He did not know if she was even aware he was there. When he was close enough to see her clearly, he crouched down and looked at her properly for the first time. Her scales were beautiful. Even lying in the snow, even sick and still, she was a remarkable creature. Each scale caught the gray winter light and gave it back softer, like snow does just before dawn. Her claws were pale and long, half curled against the frozen ground. Her face was long and sharp-boned, and even with her eyes closed she looked proud somehow. Like she had been built to stand on high rocks and strong wind. Sam opened his bag. He leaned in carefully and pressed 2 fingers gently against the soft skin just behind her jaw, where the scales were thinner. He felt for a pulse. It was there. Slow and uneven, but there. Then he moved lower. He ran his hands carefully along her side, pressing lightly, checking. When he reached her belly, he stopped. He pressed again. Slowly. Gently. His face changed. She was pregnant. He could feel it clearly now that he was close. The shape of her belly, the tension beneath the scales, the way her body was working even while she lay still. She was carrying eggs. Or hatchlings. He was not certain which, but the truth of it settled into him like cold water. She was not just dying. She was a mother. And then he found the infection. It was on her left side, low and deep, where a wound had closed badly over something still inside. The skin around it was swollen and hot even against the winter air. That was the smell he had followed down from the path. Not the dragon herself, but the sickness inside her. Sam sat back on his heels. He looked at her face. Her eyes were open now. Just barely. 2 pale eyes, almost colorless, watching him from beneath heavy lids. She was looking at him the way a creature looks when it has given up expecting anything good. Tired. Waiting. Sam looked back at her steadily. "All right," he said quietly. Not to anyone in particular. just to the cold air and the frozen river and the enormous dying dragon looking at him like he was going to leave too. "All right," he said again. And he did not leave. Sam walked back up the mountain path as the sun was dropping behind the peaks. His mind was already working through what he needed. Clean water. Boiled and cooled. Drawing herbs for infection. Moss packing for the wound. A knife, clean and sharp, for what he suspected he would have to do before morning. He had some of these things in his bag. Not enough. Not nearly enough for an animal this size. He needed the village. Karn was a small place. 30 or so houses built close together against the cold, with a main road that turned to mud every spring and froze solid every winter. Sam had passed through it before years ago. He remembered it as quiet and careful. The kind of village that looked after its own and trusted nobody else much. He walked straight to the elder's house. The elder of Karn was a woman named Dot. She was old and small and sharp-eyed, and she opened her door before Sam even knocked, like she had been watching the path from her window. "You were down by the river?" she said. It was not a question. "Yes," Sam said. "I need supplies. I can pay." Dot looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped back and let him inside. The house was warm. A fire burned in the center of the room, and 2 other villagers were sitting near it. Gil was one of them. He looked at Sam without surprise, like he had known this was coming. Sam explained quickly and clearly. The infection. The wound. The pregnancy. What he needed and why. He kept his voice calm and plain. He was not asking for much. Just herbs, clean cloth, a pot for boiling water, and someone to carry it down with him if anyone was willing. Dot listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "No." Sam looked at her. "That creature is cursed," Dot said. "White scales. Everyone in this valley knows what that means. My grandfather saw one when he was young. 3 days later his brother was dead and his farm was ash. We do not go near white dragons. We do not help them. And we do not let outsiders come into our village and pull trouble down on our heads." "She is dying," Sam said. "Yes," Dot said. "And when she is dead, the curse dies with her. That is the best outcome for everyone." "She is carrying young," Sam said. "Then they die too," Dot said. Her voice was not cruel. It was just flat and final, the way a door sounds when it closes. "I am sorry, stranger. But my first duty is to the people in this village. Not to a cursed animal on a riverbank. Go somewhere else for your supplies." Sam looked around the room. Gil was looking at the fire. The other villager was looking at his hands. Nobody spoke. Sam nodded once. "All right," he said. "Thank you for your time." He walked out. He stood in the cold village road for a moment, thinking. Then he went to the trader's house at the far end of the village. He did not ask this time. He simply bought what he needed with his own coin, piece by piece. Clean cloth from the trader's wife. A bundle of dried root herbs used for drawing out infection. A small clay pot. A roll of thick moss from a stack by the door. A second knife, short and clean. Salt. 3 lengths of rope. The trader's wife, a young woman named Anne, watched him lay out his coin on her counter without asking what it was for. She packed everything into a cloth sack without a word. Then, just before Sam picked it up, she reached under the counter and added a small bundle of something wrapped in brown paper. "Fever wort," she said quietly, not looking at him. "For the infection. Stronger than the root. Boil it and press the paste directly into the wound." She paused. "I did not give you that." Sam looked at her. She was already turned away, stacking things on a shelf with her back to him. "Thank you," he said. She said nothing. Sam picked up the sack and walked back out into the cold. The walk back down to the river took longer in the dark. Sam moved carefully, one hand on the rock face where the trail was narrow. The temperature had dropped hard. His breath came out in thick white clouds. The sack was heavy on his shoulder. He did not stop. She was still there. He had half expected on the walk down to find her gone or dead. But she was exactly where he had left her, lying on her side in the snow, her pale sides rising and falling in that slow, labored way. Her eyes opened when he came close. That same flat, waiting look. Sam set down his sack and got to work. He built a small fire first, close enough to work by but far enough not to frighten her. He boiled water in the clay pot. He prepared the fever wort the way Anne had told him. He worked quietly and methodically, the way he always worked, without rushing and without wasting movement. When the paste was ready, he moved to her side. The wound was worse up close in the firelight. Swollen and dark at the edges, with heat rising off it that he could feel before he even touched it. Sam pressed his lips together. He took his clean knife. He worked carefully and without flinching, opening the wound just enough to let it drain, then packing the feverwort paste deep inside and pressing clean cloth over it. The dragon made a sound low in her throat. Not a roar. Not a threat. Just a sound. Like pain acknowledged. Sam kept working. He worked through the night. Replacing the packing. Boiling more water. Keeping the fire going. Checking her breathing, her pulse, the temperature of the wound. He did not sleep. The cold kept him sharp and the work kept him focused. Just before dawn the sky turned from black to deep blue. Sam pressed his hand carefully against the wound. The heat was fading. He sat back slowly and let out a long breath. He looked at her face. Her pale eyes were open and watching him. Her breathing was slower now but steadier. Easier. The broken, labored quality was leaving it. The fever was breaking. Sam looked up at the dark blue sky and said nothing. He just sat there in the snow beside an enormous white dragon, tired down to his bones, while the mountain slowly got ready for morning. Sam spent the day resting close to the fire. He did not sleep deeply. He never did when he was working. He dozed in short stretches, waking every little while to check on her. Each time he opened his eyes she was there, white and still against the snow, her breathing a little steadier than the time before. By midday she had lifted her head slightly. Not much. Just enough to look around. Just enough to show that something in her was coming back. Sam took that as a good sign. He ate a little from his pack. Hard bread and dried meat, the kind that lasted long on the road. He melted snow in his clay pot for water and drank it warm. He checked the wound again in the afternoon light. The swelling had gone down noticeably. The dark edges were fading. The heat was nearly gone. He repacked it with the last of the feverwort paste and covered it cleanly. She watched him do all of it. She had been watching him since morning. Not the way she had watched him before, with that flat and waiting look that expected nothing. This was different. Quieter. More careful. Like she was trying to understand something she had not seen before. Sam did not make a big thing of it. He just worked. By late afternoon she had shifted her position slightly, pulling her wings closer to her body and tucking her head in a little. Sam noticed she was breathing differently. Shorter. More deliberate. He stood and watched her for a minute trying to read it. He had seen that kind of breathing before. Not in dragons. In animals. In the barn animals he had tended years ago when he was still learning his trade, before he became a proper healer and took to the road. He had seen it in dogs and goats and once in a large draft horse. That careful, inward breathing that meant the body was turning its attention to something specific. Something was beginning. Sam looked at the sky. The sun was already behind the peaks and the temperature was falling fast. He built the fire up higher and gathered everything he had left. The clean cloth. The rope. The boiled water still sitting warm in the clay pot. His short knife, clean and ready. He did not know exactly what was coming or how fast. But he wanted to be ready. He did not have to wait long. It started just after dark. The dragon shifted again, more urgently this time, and made a low sound that was different from anything Sam had heard from her before. Not pain exactly. Something more focused than pain. Her body was working now, visibly, her sides contracting in long, slow waves. Sam moved closer and stayed low and calm, speaking to her in a quiet, steady voice even though he knew she could not understand his words. He had found, over the years, that tone mattered more than words. In a barn. In a sickroom. On a battlefield. The tone of a calm voice did something to a frightened creature that no words could quite do on their own. She seemed to settle slightly when he spoke. The first hatchling came within the hour. It arrived in a tough translucent sack, small and curled, and Sam worked quickly with his short knife to open it cleanly. The hatchling inside was tiny. Pale white, almost pink at the edges, with soft scale buds that had not hardened yet. It moved weakly and made a thin, reedy sound. Sam cleared its mouth and nose carefully and laid it against the mother's side where it was warmest. The second came not long after. Bigger than the first. This one was moving strongly before Sam even had the sack open, pushing against the membrane with small fierce legs. It made a sound like a creak and then a sharp hiss. Sam almost smiled. The third came slower. The mother was tiring. Sam could see it in the way her contractions were spacing out, losing their rhythm. He talked to her steadily through it. Just words. Just sound. She pushed when he kept his voice firm and rested when he softened it. He did not know if she was responding to him or just to some internal rhythm, but he kept talking either way. The third hatchling arrived and was fine. Then came the fourth. Sam knew something was wrong before it was fully out. The sack was intact but dark inside, and when he opened it the hatchling within was completely still. Pure white. Smaller than the others. Perfectly formed, every tiny scale in place, but lying without movement in his hands and making no sound at all. Sam did not hesitate. He cleared the mouth first, then the nose. He tilted the small head back the way he had been taught, the same way he had been taught for human infants in difficult births. He covered the tiny mouth and nose with his own mouth, the way the body was just small enough to allow, and breathed. Gently. Carefully. Not too much. Just enough. He pulled back. Wash. Nothing. He placed 2 fingers on the tiny chest and pressed. Slow and steady. The same rhythm he had used on a man pulled from a river once, 3 years ago. The man had lived. He breathed again. Pressed again. The hatchling moved. It was small at first. Just a twitch. Then the tiny chest shuddered and the small mouth opened and there was a sound, thin and sharp and furious, like something that had just been pulled back from somewhere very far away and was not happy about how cold it was here. Sam let out a long slow breath. He held the hatchling close to the fire for a moment, warming it, and then placed it gently with the others. He looked up at the mother. She was already looking at him. Then it came. From deep inside her chest, a sound unlike anything Sam had ever heard in his life. Low and vast and shaking, like the mountain itself had found a voice. It rolled out across the frozen river and up the rock face and into the dark sky above. It was not a roar. It was something older than a roar. Something that had no name in any human language. Sam sat very still in the snow and let it wash over him. The fire crackled. The 4 hatchlings made soft small sounds against their mother's side. And the mountain held the echo of that sound long after she had gone quiet, passing it from rock to rock until it faded into the stars. Someone in the village had heard the sound. It had come down from the mountain in the deep of the night, rolling over the rooftops of Karn like slow thunder. People had sat up in their beds. Dogs had gone quiet. A baby had stopped crying mid-breath. The sound had no clear direction. It simply arrived everywhere at once and then faded, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the one before it. Dot had been awake already. She stood at her window and looked up toward the ridge for a long time after the sound had gone. Her face was still and unreadable. She had lived in this valley for 70 years. She had heard wolves and storms and the deep crack of ice breaking on the river in spring. She had never heard anything like that. By first light she had made a decision. She gathered the men of the village at the main road. 8 of them including Gil, all carrying either a tool or a torch. She did not tell them what to expect. She did not know herself. She told them only that they were going to the ridge to see what had happened and that they would go together and they would be calm. They were not calm. They climbed the trail in the gray pre-dawn light, breath coming out in clouds, boots crunching on the hard snow. Nobody spoke much. Gil kept his torch raised even though it was getting light enough to see. The youngest of the group, a boy of about 16 named Ed, stayed close to the man in front of him and tried not to show that his hands were shaking. They reached the ridge just as the sun broke over the eastern peaks. Dot stopped first. The men behind her stopped too, one by one, until all 8 of them were standing on the ridge in a ragged line, looking down at the riverbank below. Nobody spoke. The albino dragon was lying on her side, just as she had been for days. But everything else was different. Her wings were no longer folded flat against her body. One wing was raised and curved outward, sheltering the ground beneath it like a roof. And beneath that wing, barely visible but unmistakably there, was Sam. He was asleep. Sitting upright against her side with his chin dropped to his chest and his hands loose in his lap. His coat was dusted with snow. Around him, pressed close in a pale and sleeping heap, were 4 small shapes. Small white shapes. Moving slightly with the slow breath of sleep. Gil made a sound that was not quite a word. The dragon's head was up. She was awake and she had been awake for some time, watching the ridge. Her pale eyes moved along the line of villagers with a steadiness that made several of them take a step back without meaning to. She did not growl. She did not shift her body into a threatening position. She simply watched them the way something watches when it is deciding what something is. Dot stood her ground. She looked at the dragon for a long time. She looked at Sam sleeping against the dragon's side with 4 newborn hatchlings pressed around him like he was part of their warmth. She looked at the wing curved over all of them like it had been placed there with care. She said nothing. But something in her face changed. It was small and it was slow, but it was there. Behind her, the rest of the village was coming up the trail. Word had moved fast through Karn the way word always moves in a small place. By the time Dot and her men had been on the ridge for 10 minutes, there were 30 people standing along the top of the slope, looking down. Old women. Young men. Mothers with children pressed against their legs. The trader and his wife Anne, who stood a little apart from the others with her arms folded and her face carefully blank. The dragon watched all of them. She did not move. None of them moved either. It was a strange and suspended moment. The sun was up properly now, pale winter light washing over the white snow and the white dragon and the sleeping man beneath her wing. The 4 hatchlings were beginning to stir, small heads lifting, tiny pale bodies shifting. One of them made a sound like a very small creak. Then a girl pushed through the crowd. She was young. 6, maybe 7 years old. A small girl named May with dark hair and a red coat that was too big for her and boots that her mother had not finished lacing properly in the rush to get up the hill. She came through the legs of the adults and stood at the front of the crowd and looked down at Sam and the hatchlings with enormous eyes. Then she started down the slope. Her mother grabbed for her and missed. Someone else tried to call her back in a sharp whisper. May did not stop. She went down the slope at the uneven fast walk of a small child who has decided something and is not going to be talked out of it. The dragon saw her coming. Every person on the ridge held their breath. Gil's hand tightened on his torch. Dot went very still. The dragon watched the small girl in the red coat picking her way down the snowy slope. She watched her for a long moment. Then, slowly and without any sudden movement, she lowered her great head. Down and to the side. Away from May's path. Clearing the way as plainly as opening a door. May reached the bottom and walked right up to Sam and put her small hand on his arm. Sam stirred. He opened his eyes slowly and looked at the small girl beside him with the mild confusion of someone waking somewhere unfamiliar. Then he looked up at the ridge full of people. He blinked. He looked at the dragon. The dragon looked back at him with her calm pale eyes. Sam looked back up at the ridge again. At 30 villagers standing in a silent row in the winter morning light, not one of them able to find a single word for what they were looking at. Sam looked down at May. "Good morning," he said quietly. May looked at the hatchlings. "Can I touch one?" she asked. Sam almost smiled. "You should ask her," he said and nodded toward the dragon. May turned and looked very seriously at the enormous white dragon. The dragon lowered her head a little further. May reached out and touched the nearest hatchling very gently with 2 fingers. On the ridge above, not one person moved. Not one person spoke. They just stood there in the cold morning light and watched something happen that none of them had any words for yet, but that all of them knew without being able to explain how they knew, that they would remember for the rest of their lives. 3 weeks had passed since the night of the hatchlings. The snow was still deep on the mountain, but the worst of the winter cold had softened slightly, the way it sometimes does in the middle of the season, as if the weather is taking a breath before the next push. The river was still frozen, but the ice had changed color, going from hard white to a duller gray that meant it was thickening at the bottom and softening at the top. Spring was still far away. But something in the air had shifted just a little. The dragon had shifted too. She was standing now. That was the first thing. Standing on all 4 legs with her head up and her wings occasionally spreading to their full width when she stretched, which she did every morning, and which still made the nearest trees shudder with the movement of air. The infection was completely gone. The wound on her side had closed cleanly and the scales around it were already growing back, pale and new and slightly softer than the rest. She moved without stiffness. She ate well. She was, by every measure Sam knew how to read, fully recovered. The hatchlings were something else entirely. They were into everything. In 3 weeks they had gone from small trembling newborns that fit in Sam's 2 hands to quick, curious, opinionated little creatures that climbed over their mother, tumbled into each other, and investigated every rock and stick and boot within reach. They had their mother's white scales, though softer and with a faint bluish tint that Sam suspected would fade as they aged. They had also, all 4 of them, decided that Sam was something between a piece of furniture and a very interesting large animal, and treated him accordingly. He had stopped being surprised at finding one asleep on his boot. The village had changed too. It had happened slowly and without anyone announcing it. First it was Anne, the trader's wife, who left a wrapped bundle of dried meat at the top of the ridge trail one morning and walked away without looking back. Then Gil had come up one afternoon with his son and left a sack of grain near the same spot. Then others. Bit by bit, quietly, the way people do things when they are not quite ready to admit they are doing them, the village of Karn had begun leaving food at the ridge. Not for Sam. For the dragon. That had not come up herself. But Sam had seen her standing at the edge of the village twice, looking up toward the mountain. He did not go down to speak to her. He thought she would come when she was ready or she would not, and either way it was her choice to make. May came up every second day with her mother. She had appointed herself something between a visitor and an assistant, and the hatchlings had accepted her in the same wholehearted way they accepted most things, which was to say immediately and with great enthusiasm. Her mother stood at a careful distance and watched, and each time she came she stood a little less carefully and a little closer than the time before. Sam watched all of it and said little. He had been thinking about leaving for a week. He had a road. He had work in other places. People who needed a healer and had no one. He had already stayed far longer than he had planned when he first came down that mountain trail and smelled something wrong in the air. His bag was packed. It had been packed for 3 days. He kept finding reasons to check one more thing, change one more dressing that no longer needed changing, make sure one more hatchling was eating properly. He knew what he was doing. He was not quite ready. But on the morning of the 23rd day he rose before dawn, checked the wound one final time, looked at the sleeping hatchlings piled against their mother's warm side, and picked up his bag. He told himself he would just go. Clean and simple. No long goodbye. That was always the right way. Long goodbyes help no one. He got about 4 steps. She moved without any warning sound. One moment she was still. The next she was standing directly in front of him, so close that Sam had to stop sharply to avoid walking into her chest. She was so much taller than him that her head, when she lowered it, came level with his face only because she bent her neck considerably to do so. Sam stood very still. She lowered her head further. Slowly. With great deliberateness. The way something moves when it wants to be sure it is understood. She brought her forehead down and pressed it gently but firmly against Sam's chest. And she held it there. Sam did not move. He had no idea what to do. His bag strap was still in his hand. He could feel the warmth of her coming through his coat, which should not have been possible for a cold-blooded creature but somehow was. He could feel the slow steadiness of her. The weight of her attention focused entirely on him. He did not know what the gesture meant. He had no books on dragon custom and no one to ask. But he felt the meaning of it the same way you feel weather changing before it arrives. Something settling. Something being decided. Something that had no word in his language but that sat in his chest like a stone placed there with care. He reached up slowly. He put his hand on the side of her great white head. They stood like that for a long moment. A man and a dragon in the pre-dawn gray, while 4 small white hatchlings slept behind them and the frozen river sat silent below and the mountain rose dark against a sky that was just beginning to lighten at the eastern edge. Then she lifted her head. She stepped to one side. The path was clear. Sam picked up his bag properly. He walked forward. He did not look back because he knew if he looked back he would not go. He had gone perhaps 50 steps up the trail when he heard it behind him. Not the deep shaking sound from the night of the hatchlings. Something quieter than that. Something meant only to carry as far as it needed to carry and no further. He kept walking. He walked until the trail bent around the rock face and the river was out of sight and the mountain was just mountain again around him, cold and quiet and very large. The village of Karn sat in the valley below. Somewhere in it Dot was probably already awake, looking up at the ridge. Somewhere on the slope May was probably still sleeping, already planning her next visit. And on the riverbank a white dragon was watching 4 white hatchlings wake up in the pale morning light, on a mountain that had heard things it would not forget. Sam walked on. He was a healer. He had a road. There were people who needed him in other places. But the world was different now than it had been 3 weeks ago, and he knew it, and he carried that knowledge with him the way you carry something small and solid in a coat pocket. There when you need it, quiet when you do not. He had not made a great speech. He had not fought anyone or defeated anything. He had smelled something wrong in the cold air and followed it down a trail and refused to walk away. That was all. That was enough.